Chapter 3, Part 2 of Through the Brazilian Wilderness. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Adam Marsatich, Alexandria, Virginia, June 2009. Through the Brazilian Wilderness by Theodore Roosevelt. Chapter 3, A Jaguar Hunt on the Taquery, Part 2. The long days spent riding through the swamp, the Pantanal, were pleasant and interesting. Several times we saw the Tamandua bandeira, the giant ant bear. Kermit shot one, because the naturalists eagerly wished for a second specimen. Afterward we were relieved of all necessity to molest the strange, out-of-date creatures. It was a surprise to us to find them habitually frequenting the open marsh. They were always on muddy ground, and in the papyrus swamp we found them in several inches of water. The stomach is thick-walled like a gizzard. The stomachs of those we shot contained adult and larval ants, chiefly termites, together with plenty of black mold and fragments of leaves, both green and dry. Doubtless the earth and the vegetable matter had merely been taken incidentally, adhering to the viscid tongue when it was thrust into the ant masses. Out in the open marsh the tamandua could neither avoid observation, nor fight effectively, nor make good its escape by flight. It was curious to see one lumbering off at a rocking canter, the big bushy tail held aloft. One, while fighting the dogs, suddenly threw itself on its back, evidently hoping to grasp a dog with its paws, and now and then reared, in order to strike at its assailants. In one patch of thick jungle we saw a black howler monkey sitting motionless in a tree-top. We also saw the swamp deer, about the size of our blacktail. It is a real swamp animal, for we found it often in the papyrus swamps, and out in the open marsh, knee-deep in the water, among the aquatic plants. The tough little horses bore us well through the marsh. Often in crossing the bayous and ponds the water rose almost to their backs, but they splashed and waded, and if necessary swam through. The dogs were a wild-looking set. Some were of distinctly wolfish appearance. These, we were assured, were descended in part from the big red wolf of the neighborhood, a tall, lank animal, with much smaller teeth than a big northern wolf. The domestic dog is undoubtedly descended from at least a dozen different species of wild dogs, wolves, jackals, some of them probably belonging to what we style different genera. The degree of fecundity or lack of fecundity between different species varies in extraordinary and inexplicable fashion in different families of mammals. In the horse family, for instance, the species are not infertile inter se, whereas among the oxen, species seemingly at least as widely separated as the horse, ass, and zebra species, such as the domestic ox, bison, yak, and gaur, breed freely together and their offspring are fertile. The lion and tiger also breed together, and produce offspring which will breed with either parent stock. And tame dogs in different quarters of the world, although all of them fertile inter se, are in many cases obviously blood kin to the neighboring wild wolf-like or jackal-like creatures which are specifically, and possibly even generically, distinct from each other. The big red wolf of the South American plains is not closely related to the northern wolves, and it was to me unexpected to find it interbreeding with ordinary domestic dogs. In the evenings after dinner we sat in the bare ranch dining room, or out under the trees in the hot darkness, and talked of many things, natural history with the naturalists, and of all kinds of other subjects both with them and with our Brazilian friends. Colonel Rondon is not simply an officer and a gentleman, in the sense that is honorably true of the best army officers in every good military service. He is also a peculiarly hardy and competent explorer, a good field naturalist and scientific man, a student and a philosopher. With him the conversation ranged from jaguar hunting and the perils of exploration in the Mato Grosso, the great wilderness, to Indian anthropology, to the dangers of a purely materialistic industrial civilization, and to positivist morality. The Colonel's positivism was in very fact to him a religion of humanity, a creed which bade him be just and kindly and useful to his fellow men, to live his life bravely, and no less bravely to face death, without reference to what he believed or did not believe, or to what the unknown hereafter might hold for him. The native hunters who accompanied us were swarthy men of mixed blood. They were barefooted and scantily clad, and each carried a long, clumsy spear and a keen machete, in the use of which he was an expert. Now and then, in the thick jungle, we had to cut out a path, and it was interesting to see one of them, though cumbered by his unwieldy spear, handling his half-broken little horse with complete ease while he hacked at limbs and branches. Of the two ordinary with us was one much the younger, and whenever we came to an unusually doubtful-looking ford or piece of boggy ground, the elder man always sent the younger one on, and sat on the bank until he saw what befell the experimenter. In that rather preposterous book of our youth, The Swiss Family Robinson, mention is made of a tame monkey called Nips, which was used to test all edible-looking things as to the healthfulness of which the adventurers felt doubtful, and because of the obvious resemblance of function we christened this younger hunter Nips. Our guides were not only hunters but cattle herders. The coarse dead grass is burned to make room for the green young grass on which the cattle thrive. Every now and then one of the men, as he rode ahead of us, without leaving the saddle, would drop a lighted match into a tussock of tall dead blades, and even as we who were behind rode by tongues of hot flame would be shooting up and a local prairie fire would have started. Kermit took Nips off with him for a solitary hunt one day. He shot two of the big marsh deer, a buck and a doe, and preserved them as museum specimens. They were in the papyrus growth, but their stomachs contained only the fine marsh grass which grows in the water and on the land along the edges of the swamps. The papyrus was used only for cover, not for food. The buck had two big scent glands beside the nostrils. In the doe these were rudimentary. On this day Kermit also came across a herd of the big, fierce, white-lipped peccary. At the sound of their grunting, Nips promptly spurred his horse and took to his heels, explaining that the peccaries would charge them, hamstring the horses, and kill the riders. Kermit went into the jungle after the truculent little hogs on foot, and followed them for an hour, but never was able to catch sight of them. In the afternoon of this same day, one of the jaguar hunters, merely ranch hands, who knew something of the chase of the jaguar, who had been searching for tracks, rode in with the information that he had found fresh sign at a spot in the swamp about 9 miles distant. Next morning we rose at 2, and had started on our jaguar hunt at 3. Colonel Rondon, Kermit, and I, with the 2 trailers or jaguar hunters, made up the party, each on a weedy, undersized marsh pony, accustomed to traversing the vast stretches of morass, and we were accompanied by a brown boy with saddlebags holding our lunch, who rode a longhorn trotting steer which he managed by a string through its nostril and lip. The 2 trailers carried each a long, clumsy spear. We had a rather poor pack. Besides our own 2 dogs, neither of which was used to jaguar hunting, there were the ranch dogs, which were well nigh worthless, and then 2 jaguar hounds borrowed for the occasion from a ranch 6 or 8 leagues distant. These were the only hounds on which we could place any trust, and they were led in leashes by the 2 trailers. One was a white bitch, the other, The best one we had was a gelded black dog. They were lean, half-starved creatures with prick ears and a look of furtive wildness. As our shabby little horses shuffled away from the ranch house, the stars were brilliant and the Southern Cross hung well up in the heavens, tilted to the right. The landscape was spectral in the light of the waning moon. At the first shallow ford, as horses and dogs splashed across, an alligator, the jacare tinga, some 5 feet long, floated unconcernedly among the splashing hoofs and paws. Evidently at night it did not fear us. Hour after hour we slogged along. Then the night grew ghostly with the first dim gray of the dawn. The sky had become overcast. The sun rose red and angry through the broken clouds. His disk flamed behind the tall, slender columns of the palms, and lit the waste fields of papyrus. The black monkeys howled mournfully. The birds awoke. Macaws, parrots, parakeets screamed at us and chattered at us as we rode by. Ibis called with wailing voices, and the plovers shrieked as they wheeled in the air. We waded across bayous and ponds, where white lilies floated on the water and thronging lilac flowers splashed the green marsh with color. At last, on the edge of a patch of jungle, in wet ground, we came on fresh jaguar tracks. Both the jaguar hounds challenged the sign. They were unleashed and galloped along the trail, while the other dogs noisily accompanied them. The hunt led right through the marsh. Evidently the jaguar had not the least distaste for water. Probably it had been hunting for capybaras or tapirs, and it had gone straight through ponds and long, winding, narrow ditches or bayous, where it must now and then have had to swim for a stroke or two. It had also wandered through the island-like stretches of tree-covered land, the trees at this point being mostly palms and tarumans. The taruman is almost as big as a live oak, with glossy foliage and fruit like an olive. The pace quickened, the motley pack burst into yelling and howling, and then a sudden quickening of the note showed that the game had either climbed a tree or turned to bay in a thicket. The former proved to be the case. The dogs had entered a patch of tall tree jungle, and as we cantered up through the marsh, we saw the jaguar high among the forked limbs of a taruman tree. It was a beautiful picture. The spotted coat of the big, lithe, formidable cat fairly shone as it snarled defiance at the pack below. I did not trust the pack. The dogs were not stanch, and if the jaguar came down and started, I feared we might lose it. So I fired at once, from a distance of 70 yards. I was using my favorite rifle, the little Springfield, which I have killed most kinds of African game, from the lion and elephant down. The bullets were the sharp, pointed kind, with the end of naked lead. At the shot the jaguar fell like a sack of sand through the branches, and although it staggered to its feet, it went but a score of yards before it sank down. And when I came up it was dead under the palms, with 3 or 4 of the bolder dogs writhing at it. The jaguar is the king of South American game, ranking on an equality with the noblest beasts of the chase of North America, and behind only the huge and fierce creatures which stand at the head of the big game of Africa and Asia. This one was an adult female. It was heavier and more powerful than a full-grown male cougar, or African panther or leopard. It was a big, powerfully built creature, giving the same effect of strength that a tiger or lion does, but that the lithe leopards and pumas do not. Its flesh, by the way, proved good eating, and when we had it for supper, although it was not cooked in the way it ought to have been. I tried it because I had found cougars such good eating. I have always regretted that in Africa I did not try lion's flesh, which I am sure must be excellent. Next day came Kermit's turn. We had the miscellaneous pack with us, all much enjoying themselves, but, Although they could help in a jaguar hunt to the extent of giving tongue and following the chase for half a mile, cowing the quarry by their clamour, they were not sufficiently staunch to be of use if there was any difficulty in the hunt. The only two dogs we could trust were the two borrowed jaguar hounds. This was the black dog's day. About 10 in the morning we came to a long, deep, winding bayou. On the opposite bank stood a capybara, looking like a blunt-nosed pig, its wet hide shining black. I killed it, and it slid into the water. Then I found that the bayou extended for a mile or two in each direction, and the two hunter guides said they did not wish to swim across for fear of the piranhas. Just at this moment we came across fresh jaguar tracks. It was hot. We had been traveling for 5 hours, and the dogs were much exhausted. The black hound in particular was nearly done up, for he had been led in a leash by one of the horsemen. He lay flat on the ground, panting, unable to catch the scent. Kermit threw water over him, and when he was thoroughly drenched and freshened, thrust his nose into the jaguar's footprints. The game old hound at once and eagerly responded. As he snuffed the scent he challenged loudly, while still laying down. Then he staggered to his feet and started on the trail, going stronger with every leap. Evidently the big cat was not far distant. Soon we found where it had swum across the bayou. Piranhas or no piranhas, we now intended to get across, and we tried to force our horses in at what seemed a likely spot. The matted growth of water plants, with their leathery, slippery stems, formed an unpleasant barrier, as the water was swimming deep for the horses. The latter were very unwilling to attempt the passage. Kermit finally forced his horse through the tangled mass, swimming, plunging, and struggling. He left a lane of clear water, through which we swam after him. The dogs splashed and swam behind us. On the other bank they struck the fresh trail and followed it at a run. It led into a long belt of timber, chiefly composed of low-growing knackery palms, with long, drooping, many-fronded branches. In silhouette they suggest coarse bamboos. The nuts hang in big clusters and look like bunches of small, unripe bananas. Among the lower palms were scattered some big ordinary trees. We cantered along outside the timber belt, listening to the dogs within, and in a moment a burst of yelling clamor from the pack told us that the jaguar was afoot. These few minutes are the really exciting moments in the chase, with hounds, of any big cat that will tree. The furious baying of the pack, the shouts and cheers of encouragement from the galloping horsemen, the wilderness surroundings, the knowledge of what the quarry is, all combined to make the moment one of fierce and thrilling excitement. Besides, in this case there was the possibility the jaguar might come to bay on the ground, in which event there would be a slight element of risk, as it might need straight shooting to stop a charge. However, as soon as the long-drawn howling and eager yelping showed that the jaguar had been overtaken, we saw him, a huge male, up in the branches of a great fig-tree. A bullet behind the shoulder, from Kermit's .405 Winchester, brought him dead to the ground. He was heavier than the very big male horse-killing cougar I shot in Colorado, whose skull Hart Merriam reported as the biggest he had ever seen. He was very nearly double the weight of any of the male African leopards we shot. He was nearly or quite the weight of the smallest of the adult African lionesses we shot while in Africa. He had the big bones, the stout frame, and the heavy muscular build of a small lion. He was not lithe and slender and long like a cougar or leopard. The tail, as with all jaguars, was short, while the girth of the body was great. His coat was beautiful, with a satiny gloss, and the dark brown spots on the gold of his back, head, and sides were hardly as conspicuous as the black of the equally well-marked spots against his white belly. This was a well-known jaguar. He had occasionally indulged in cattle killing. On one occasion during the floods he had taken up his abode near the ranch house, and had killed a couple of cows and a young steer. The hunters had followed him, but he had made his escape, and for the time being had abandoned the neighborhood. In these marshes each jaguar had a wide irregular range, and traveled a good deal, perhaps only passing a day or two in a given locality, perhaps spending a week there while game was plentiful. Jaguars love the water. They drink greedily and swim freely. In this country they rambled through the night across the marshes and prowled along the edges of the ponds and bayous, catching the capybaras and the caimans. For these small pond caimans, the jacare tinga, form part of their habitual food, and a big jaguar when hungry will attack and kill large caimans and crocodiles if he can get them a few yards from the water. On these marshes the jaguars also follow the peccary herds. It is said that they always strike the hindmost of a band of the fierce little wild pigs. Elsewhere they often prey on the tapir. If in timber, however, the jaguar must kill it at once, for the squat, thick-skinned, wedge-shaped tapir has no respect for timber, as Colonel Rondon phrased it, and rushes with such blind, headlong speed through and among the branches and trunks that if not immediately killed, it brushes the jaguar off, the claws leaving long raking scars in the tough hide. Cattle are often killed. The jaguar will not meddle with a big bull, and is cautious about attacking a herd accompanied by a bull, but it will at times, where wild game is scarce, kill every other domestic animal. It is a thirsty brute, and if it kills far from water, will often drag its victim a long distance toward a pond or stream. Colonel Rondon had once come across a horse which a jaguar had thus killed, and dragged for over a mile. Jaguars also stalk and kill the deer. In this neighborhood they seem to be less habitual deer hunters than the cougars. Whether this is generally the case I cannot say. They have been known to pounce on and devour good-sized anacondas. In this particular neighborhood the ordinary jaguars molested the cattle and horses hardly at all, except now, and then to kill calves. It was only occasionally that under special circumstances some old male took to cattle killing. There were plenty of capybaras and deer, and evidently the big spotted cats preferred the easier prey when it was available. Exactly as in East Africa we found the lions living almost exclusively on zebra and antelope, and not molesting the buffalo and domestic cattle, which in other parts of Africa furnish their habitual prey. In some other neighborhoods, not far distant, our host informed us that the jaguars lived almost exclusively on horses and cattle. They also told us that the cougars had the same habits as the jaguars, except that they did not prey on such big animals. The cougars on this ranch never molested the foals, a fact which astonished me, as in the Rockies they are the worst enemies of foals. It was interesting to find that my hosts and the mixed-blood hunters and ranch workers combined special knowledge of many of the habits of these big cats with a curious ignorance of other matters concerning them, and a readiness to believe fables about them. This was precisely what I had found to be the case with the old-time North American hunters in discussing the puma, bear, and wolf, and with the English and Boer hunters of Africa when they spoke of the lion and rhinoceros. Until the habit of scientific accuracy in observation and record is achieved, and until specimens are preserved and carefully compared, entirely truthful men, at home in the wilderness, would wholeheartedly accept, and repeat as matters of gospel faith, theories which split the grizzly and black bears of each locality in the United States, and the lions and black rhinos of South Africa, or the jaguars and pumas of any portion of South America, into several different species, all with widely different habits. They will, moreover, describe these imaginary habits with such sincerity and minuteness that they deceive most listeners, and the result sometimes is that an otherwise good naturalist will perpetuate these fables, as Hudson did when he wrote of the puma. Hudson was a capital observer and writer when he dealt with the ordinary birds and mammals of the well-settled districts near Buenos Aires and at the mouth of the Rio Negro. But he knew nothing of the wilderness. This is no reflection on him. His books are great favorites of mine, and are to a large degree models of what such books should be. I only wish that there were hundreds of such writers and observers who would give us similar books for all parts of America, but it is a mistake to accept him as an authority on that concerning which he was ignorant. Chapter 3, Part 2.